Good morning.
Good morning. Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and discuss the latest craziness that's going on in the world with you. And thank you for sharing your story with us. It's tough. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of things that people will react really disgustingly to lately. And thank you for sharing that with everybody.
Yeah. I think it's really important, like I was mentioning, like when I was having this thing and choosing, hey, I got to get to the hospital. What should I do? I actually did a cost benefit analysis about an ambulance, and people should not be like, most people I know don't have $10,000 laying around. And that's how much an ambulance costs. Usually isn't covered by insurance, or at least all of it. And it's terrible that in America, we literally have to think, oh, should I order an ambulance or not? And
yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. That shouldn't even cross your mind when you're in danger. But unfortunately, our reality is much different in this country.
Yeah, it is. And, but now I want to talk about you. And I saw, before you came on the show, I noticed that you got censored a bit. And then we saw another major account of a truth teller who's a former Marine, an intelligence person who he also revealed that there were no weapons of mass destruction and was a whistleblower. And that's Scott Ritter. And they suspended his account, but they censored yours. Can you tell our audience a little bit about what happened?
Yeah, so I had done a breakdown yesterday on that I put on my show, that I went over on my show. And it was this breakdown just basically on what happened in Bucha and how, like, the different contradictions that were there, specifically coming from the Russian Defense Ministry, and how they alleged that they did not participate in that they had nothing to do with it, that the mayor had already declared victory because Russians had left, and Russians had left because there was no military tactical need for them to be there. And so there was a period of days in between where nothing was said, and the bodies, the way they were laid out, a lot of people in Ukraine and people who were journalists that were on the ground, like Gonzalo Lira, were saying, like, this doesn't look like the Russians did it, the body positioning, everything. And then, of course, the Ukrainian media had come in. And just after they came in is when they started releasing this footage. So there were a multitude of things that I was laying out there, including a video of where these Ukrainian officers, and you could tell they were Ukrainian by the blue band, were saying, can I shoot those that don't have that blue band? And they were told, yeah, fuck yeah. And so there was a multitude of videos that some of them weren't even mine. There was only one video that I had posted that I uploaded from Telegram, but I said specifically, I cited who said it. I cited the sources. It was never like me saying anything.
Right.
And initially they locked my account, and they said they took it down because it was, they didn't say why. They just said, we took it down. You violated Twitter rules. And I said, okay, well, let me appeal that. So I appealed it, and they denied the appeal. And they said now it was harassment and abuse. And they didn't say that the information was wrong, just that it was harassment and abuse. And they didn't specify what in that thread was abuse. And
right.
So
and who are you harassing?
Exactly. Right? I don't know what's harassing. And so they basically say in order to get your account back, you have to delete this tweet. And thankfully, I had already put the whole tweet in my breakdown of yesterday's show, which I will clip out, which should be out today in clips. But in that breakdown, you can see the whole thread. So I deleted the tweet because then I wouldn't get my account back. But in deleting the tweet, you also, that they were going to delete anyway, you also have to, you're admitting that you did something wrong, which I didn't do anything wrong. And so this happened right after the New York Times released an article saying that Twitter was going to crack down on any sort of narrative straying away from the State Department narrative, essentially. And so that was the first thing. And then, of course, as you mentioned, Scott Ritter immediately was taken down off of Twitter. No idea why. I think I know he wrote an article for RT, but I don't know any other reason as to further. I just know that he was taken down off Twitter. And this has happened in the last few hours with Scott Ritter.
Right. You know, and you're seeing it. I saw an article, of course, yesterday. It was in Yahoo News, and it was discussing that very thing about how they're going to be censoring any Russian accounts on Twitter. And then, of course, you have the announcement of Elon Musk. But let's get back to Bush. I want to talk a little bit more about that because people are seeing in mainstream news, because I went ahead and looked at a few things, some really graphic accounts and, you know, graphic violence. And it's very confusing when people say, when people, you know, that are just going about their everyday lives, that are really not examining the geopolitical, you know, world, what's true and what's not. And that's what's really frightening about how the Western media is really taken almost this approach of just completely controlling the narrative and the lens of which we see this. And to the point where you can't discern it. Igor Lopotnik, you know, directed several documentaries with Oliver Stone, one of them, Ukraine on Fire. He talked about this type of fake propaganda from Ukraine and some of the corruption back with 2014. So this propaganda war began then, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, that propaganda has long been pushed. I mean, for a while. I mean, even like you could even go further about with McCarthyism and like how that is part
That's
of the
70 years. Yeah.
Propaganda, exactly. And it's part of this whole priming people to be against anything Russia. And when people say things like, oh, I don't like Putin, blah, 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 they'll just come up to you and say they don't like Putin, but they don't tell you exactly why, what's their reason behind it, what exactly has he done that they don't like. And they can't usually answer those questions because they don't realize that they have been propagandized from like birth to hate anything Russian. And now, of course, we had the elections come into play in 2016 with Russiagate. And even though that was, by all accounts, debunked, it doesn't matter. The liberal contingent is still acting like that's a thing. It's still calling everybody, you know, a Russian asset. I mean, I got called a Putinist in 2017, 2016, and nothing has changed. I mean, I'm still getting told I'm paid by Putin. And it's this whole thing where it doesn't matter what the facts are. What matters is the emotion that it riles up in people. And so what's happened is that the State Department has noticed that a lot of the progressive and the liberal left are very easily manipulated by emotion. And so they've used and weaponized that emotion to try to get them to accept NATO, to manufacture consent for war, using this emotion just like they did with the pandemic in terms of this is your enemy. So, you know, before it was unvaccinated were the enemy. Anybody that had any dissent on that was the enemy. Then it was, okay, now Putin is your enemy. Russians are your enemy. Anybody that says anything negative about Ukraine is your enemy. Why? Right. Look, we're killing all these people, blah, blah, blah. But they don't tell the other side with historical context as to how we got here.
No. Yeah, there's no balance. They're not talking about the neo-Nazis. They're denying it. They don't talk about the Azov, you know, they don't talk about, you know, Donbass and the 14,000 people that were slaughtered, the Russian nationals that were slaughtered. They don't talk about what prompted Putin to take the military operation action, or the way there's been no discussion about diplomacy.